fact-checked by Darcy Heikkinen. How would you choose to die if you could? Homer Simpson seemed to believe he would die either by too much happiness, sounds okay, right? He also predicted he may die in a naked girl avalanche, Treehouse of Horror 15, S16E01. Sound good, lads? When you think about it, probably not, such choices are beyond our control. Well, most of us. Who knows what Elon's final plans are? We'll mostly die from age-related illnesses, cancer, or unfortunate accidents on the road. But there are some ways of dying that are more elaborate, crueler, and, mercifully, rarer. It is these terrible ways of kicking the bucket that we discuss in this list. Pray these fates never befall you. After you read, try some happy thoughts. We suggest thinking about a puppy. Not a rabid one, though. Related, top 10 ways to dispose of your body after death. 10. Falling to your death at a popular beauty spot. A history of falls into the Grand Canyon, a short documentary, fascinating horror. Or, for that matter, any unintentional fall from a great height, really. However, falling to your death from, say, a viewing station at the Grand Canyon might be slightly worse given the unexpected nature of your sudden plunge. Bungee jumping or skydiving accidents, as awful as they must be, have the individual already in a state of excitement. Given the activity itself, the slight chance of death is part of the thrill. Smiling for a selfie or lining up your viewfinder to catch the perfect sunset doesn't usually include the thought of a possible fall onto some jagged rocks hundreds of feet below. The odds of dying at one of the USA's most world-famous natural attractions is 1 in 400,000. But these types of probabilistic statements don't mean that one person per 400,000 people who visit will die. It means, on average. So if you try and take that perfect sunset selfie too close to an edge, slip, and take that last plunge, you will be that 1 in 400,000. It's behavior-driven, not a numerically bound phenomenon. Take one case recounted on mygrandcanyonpark.com. These cases of unexpected falls are tragic, including a 38-year-old father from Texas pretending to fall to scare his daughter, who then really did fall 400 feet, 122 meters, to his death back in 2015. As the title of this list suggests, awful. 1. 9. Radiation poisoning. The most radioactive man in history, Hisashi Aoki. Given a quick scan of this listicle's title and that of this entry, you may be forgiven for uttering a gloriously 90s, well, duh. But are you fully aware of what acute radiation poisoning entails? Hisashi Aoki, a 35-year-old worker at a fuel enrichment plant near Tokaimura, Japan, found out in 1999. After a critical event that prompted mass evacuations in the surrounding area, Aoki was among several technicians that were treated for the effects of radiation burns and sickness. Aoki spent 83 days in a Tokyo hospital with a white blood cell count so low that he effectively ceased to have an immune system. Despite this awful situation, the effects were initially hidden from observers at the hospital. One nurse noted that she believed he could go home on the day of his transfer, only showing what seemed like severe sunburn and some swelling. But with only 10% of the normal levels of white blood cells, every pathogen imaginable could now prey upon the helpless man, and many did. His skin began to crack and slough away. He began to secrete 3 liters, 3 quarts of diarrhea a day, began to bleed from his orifices, and needed to be heavily bandaged due to ever-spreading, weeping, and bloody sores on his body. His eyelids fell off almost completely. He eventually died of multiple organ failure, despite the best efforts of the medical team and his family. They insisted on having him revived each time his heart stopped, which may have contributed to his eventual death. But 2. 8. Being the victim of a serial killer. Teen survives abduction by serial killer, now thrives in law enforcement. People often focus far too much on killers in our society. True crime is a massive area of interest. In and of itself, this isn't a bad thing. This sort of focus can lead to greater scrutiny and knowledge, aiding in prevention and encouraging situational awareness. All too often, unfortunately, the victims get all but forgotten. Many documentarians, YouTubers, and journalists don't fall into this trap, but plenty do, even to that point of a gross sort of anti-hero worship for sociopathic monsters develops. Instead of seeing it from the killer's perspective, deeds and patterns of behavior, consider the experience of the victims. The horror. The helplessness. The pain. There are plenty of examples to highlight here, but given the glory-seeking nature of many of these degenerate murderers, perhaps it's better for you to do your own research in this instance. But keep it academic, lest the lurid draw of these crimes become a bit too entertaining. And when you really think about it, does that not make this way of dying all the worse? If a person becomes the victim of a serial murderer today, will they not have thoughts of who would play them and, more bleakly, their killer in the movie? Zac Efron played Bundy. 3. 7. Getting attacked or eaten by a bear. Russian teen calls mother on phone as she's eaten alive by bears. We forget that humans were prey for most of our history. With all our inventions, guns, secure houses, barbed wire, around 200 people a year still die from some animal-related incidents in the US alone. In India, around 300 people die each year just due to elephant attacks. Remember, they also have tigers, snakes, and bears over there. It is this last predator that should strike the most acute fear in us. Sure, other big toothy mammals still roam the earth, but none tend to kill as cruelly as our ursine cousins. Large felines, for instance, opt to quickly kill by means of crushing suffocation. Bears don't care about quick or painless. They take their time often, they'll eat you alive. 4. 6. Exposure. What would 24 hours in the desert do to your body? Exposure to the elements is no fun, as anyone who has forgotten an umbrella on a rainy day will attest to. The exposure found in official documents regarding missing persons, however, is more than an annoying inconvenience, and the resulting sniffy nose death from / by exposure may be a conclusion that leaves readers of news stories saddened, but also with a sense of, well, there we go then. The person died by being outside, that's why we remain terminally online in our man caves / lady lounges. The human body has an inbuilt will to survive. Unless one attempts suicide by refusing nutrition and hydration in the wilds, most lost, inexperienced / injured / unprepared, people will still strive to stay alive, prolonging their suffering and inevitable demise. In cold or high-altitude environments, for instance, you'll probably die from hypothermia. Uncontrollable shivering is followed by amnesia, confusion, and slurred speech. Then the fun really begins. You'll stop shivering, hallucinate, and may engage in strange behaviors like paradoxical undressing and terminal burrowing, two strange symptoms that tend to hasten your frozen demise. Add in a dose of malnutrition and frostbitten limbs and digits, and you have a truly miserable end. In the desert, however, it's a good deal slower. Dehydration will kill you quicker than in more temperate climates. Still, the pain from sunburn and the hastened organ failure, sunstroke causing puking, and general confusion guarantee your death will be awful. In the deep woods, well, it can take months. Take the case of Christopher McCandless. He died 113 or so days after trying to live closer to nature in the wilds of Alaska. He seems to have starved to death or slowly poisoned himself by eating the wrong berries. He recorded most of his experiences and thoughts in his journal. That's a long, lonely death. 5. Contracting this cruel disease. 60 Minutes Archive, Frontotemporal Dementia. One of the main fears that mankind holds, alongside snakes, spiders, the dark, death, and heights, is that of losing one's mind. Iris Murdoch, the great Anglo-Irish author and philosopher, once said, "At the moment I'm just falling, just falling, as it were. I think of things, and then they go away." Poignant and terrifying to consider. She had Alzheimer's disease. A similar cruel illness is frontotemporal dementia. Unlike other disorders that fall into the brackets of dementia, this illness that affects the brain's frontal lobes tends to begin around 2 decades sooner than the other forms, from 45 onward. Typically, other forms tend to begin aged 65 and above. The commonly known symptom, namely, memory loss, doesn't occur until